All right, the wind is blowing something fierce. It's raining, and we're gonna try and catch some walleyes for you. I put the jig in a crawler away. I'm going with more of a plus size offering in this video. So this is gonna be a really fun one. Stay tuned. I'm gonna share some really good tips, and we're gonna talk about catching walleyes on some bigger presentations. So I think this is gonna be a fun one. There you go. He crushed it. Just thumped it. How fun is that? That's a good walleye. All right. Ooh, this one's really cool. You guys are gonna like this guy. He is a true blue walleye. Wow, how pretty. Guys, just wait till you see this thing. Holy cow. Look at that. How gorgeous is that fish? That was a bit of a surprise right there. Look at that blue tail, blue fin up here. So cool. Wow, this is a gorgeous fish. Holy crud. And ate the old swim bait with an underspin. So cool. Swim bait fish, blue walleye, just an absolute beauty. Let's get this thing back in the water. All right, so we're moving to the next spot here. I just wanted to make a quick note that right now, the conditions are obviously pretty nasty, so I don't have some of my cameras out. We just got that one main camera going up there. I'm trying to record some audio. I may have lost some audio depending on my gear or whatever, but we're pulling up to the next hump, so my apologies for no live scope recording. But we're just gonna go out and catch some fish, and you know, the other alternative is just not having any video. So I would tend to think that some sort of video is gonna be better than nothing. So let's get back to fishing. You don't necessarily need to be moving that bait through the water column. A lot of times you'll get a lot of bites just basically having that bait on the bottom. That's a beauty right there, right? Look at how built that thing is. It's not even wildly long, but it's got really sinking tall shoulders. Beautiful, gorgeous fish, man. All right, we'll get him back. That's one of the biggest keys, you know, if I'm casting through an area, oftentimes a good strategy for walleyes, if I'm just fan casting, I'm going to be casting out a good distance away, 80, 90 feet, letting it sink to bottom, watching the line go down until it finally stops, and then I'm just going to slow reel that bait just across the bottom. That's basically, you know, pretty universal way to fish bigger swim baits, whether it's walleyes or bass or pike or anything like that. But one thing that can be really key is when you're in an area where there are some fish, so you swim that bait and then stop swimming the bait, stop your retrieve, and let that bait go down to the bottom. One thing that's cool about the big eye candy plastics is just the fact that they're very buoyant. So basically, when this jig is on the bottom, it's going to be sitting essentially like this. Even though it doesn't have a stand-up type head, it's going to be sitting on the bottom, pointed up to some degree. So letting this bait sit on bottom is when you can get a lot of bites some days. Now, other days, you'll be swimming that bait, and they are just going to crunch it as you're swimming it. But other days, they want it on the bottom more often than not. And if you are using forward-facing sonar, just being able to watch the mood of the fish, see what it's doing. You have like a very, very small window to get a bite if you are swimming that bait past the fish. Sometimes a big profile like this actually is more likely to trigger that big aggressive strike. But So some days they will just crunch this thing right away, but other days walleyes need something on the bottom, and you have such a short window when you're just swimming that bait past them, and they're either gonna bite it or not, that, you know, if the fish doesn't bite it within that second or two, and maybe it's starting to tail the bait and follow it, just let that thing sit on the bottom, and oftentimes that's a good way to get a bite. That fish cracked it right away. That is one of the great things about swim baits. It's just the fact that when a fish wants a big bait like this, and they are just gonna smoke it. I gotta move this mount lock. This fish keeps on running back and forth right in front of the trolling motor. But yeah, that is one thing that I do love about this presentation. The really they are gonna hit it way harder than they're gonna hit a little finesse jig with a night crawler, something like that. Beauty. Great. There we go. Just another beautiful walleye right there. And that one had it about halfway down the mouth. The head's just barely sticking out. But that fish woofed it. Beautiful. Yeah, so that is one thing I love about it. Fish have to bite it hard. They see it as a big meal. And they basically have to commit. They can't just nip at it. That is the one thing about a jig and a crawler, you know, or a jig and a minnow, or something with a leech on it, anything like that, is those walleyes can come up and they can kind of do like a little taste sampling. They can come up and just grab the back of it, and a finessey presentation like that is going to elicit a finessey bite. Something big. Usually they hit it hard. You know, I'll talk about when I'm using live bait, give it to them for a second, and then set the hook. These things, you just set the hook right away and pop a walleye. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. Bigger baits, bigger strikes. All right, I got one right underneath the boat here. This is kind of like a classic puppet minnow fish, where, oh my gosh, where you might drop a puppet minnow down on them and see if it'll react to you just because it's right underneath the boat. This one, no puppet minnow required. This thing was more than willing to just grab this plastic as soon as it hit the bottom. That is one thing too, you know, a lot of people will advise you if you're fishing a swim bait, you want to cast that bait past the fish and then swim it past them. You know, I think that is a viable strategy, but a lot of times if you're just dropping this bait right on their head, that is going to be that's going to be a viable strategy as well, where that fish is going to either crack it or not, because it's a big presentation. They're going to kind of make their decision. So I like to kind of, I got distracted. I was wondering that the fish was really dogging me, and I'm like, might be a better fish. So I lost my train of thought a little bit there, but that's a nice walleye. It's kind of a skinny one, but it's plus size for sure. Look at this one. What a beautiful fish. She's probably hungry just given how skinny she was. But this is a good one. This is kind of like a mid-high 20-incher. God, what a beauty. And poke the swim bait just like that. Let's get her right back in the water. There we go. There we go. Another Walter on the deck. Not a giant. but actually a perfect size eater if we were keeping today. Golly, got a good attitude. All right, there we go. Just a good size eater right there. Yeah, this is one of those deals where, man, when you're out fishing in really tough conditions like this, really windy conditions, I should say. All right, so here's what I think I'm gonna do. I'm going to talk about a few different tips that you can use while you're fishing in the wind. So number one is just gonna be upsizing baits. So this one right here is a half ounce swim bait with a 4-inch plastic. So that's a heavier jig. You know, back home, like a heavier jig for me, like a really heavy jig would be like a 3/8 ounce. But like generally if I'm using a jig in a plastic, I'm gonna be in that 1/4 ounce range. And this is definitely on the heavier side, being a half ounce. And you could go even heavier. I can make the argument depending on how deep you're fishing, but going with heavier baits, big jigs like this. You've also got like straight tail plastics. I kind of wanted to do this piece on swim baits, and they are biting swim baits, but what else I do have rigged up right now is this is a 3/8 ounce head with a straight tail plastic. And the thing about the straight tail plastic is the fact that it creates a lot less resistance in the water, so you don't need as heavy of a head. But this is a 3/8 ounce. And then the other presentation that I have ready to go for fishing in big wind like this is a puppet minnow. So basically any kind of glide bait. This is a number 4 size. So this is gonna fall fast, give it a couple rips, and either the fish is gonna bite it or it's not. So that is one tip for fishing in the wind. Another big tip for fishing in the wind is obviously spot lock is gonna be your best friend. So utilize spot lock whenever you can. And I am definitely a big proponent of using forward-facing sonar on your trolling motor. But this is one of the few times where I would say you may have a bit of an advantage if you have it on a separate pole. So I do still think just moving around, even in this big wind like this, it is nice to have it on your trolling motor. You can be so efficient just being hands-free. But with that being said, you know, me and my buddy Brett McComas were talking about it, and it's just one of those deals where we all came up, we brought our own boats, and he was just kicking himself because he always has a pole in the back of his boat, because he has people that'll come fish with him. You know, when I hop in the boat with him and we do tournaments, it's nice having that live scope in the back just to have it. And he pulled it out and he was kicking himself because he didn't have it for this trip. Because how nice is it to be able to spot lock right here, and you know you have fish back behind you, you cast with the wind. So spot lock is your friend. Use bigger baits, and I would also say don't be afraid to hide from the wind. So we actually have like a big chunk of land. We're not very far from shore. It might look like it based on the background with this GoPro, but we're not very far from shore, and it's still ripping. But if I was in other areas, and there are some other areas that I would deem to be kind of fishier, maybe fishier areas where maybe I could catch some more fish. If we went to those areas, I mean, I don't know if my spot lock would even hold. It probably wouldn't, because it is just absolutely ripping today. It's like over 30 mile an hour gusts. So with that being said, pick areas where there's not as much wind. You don't have to tough it out in the toughest spots. Sometimes just being able to have better boat control because you're in an area with less wind, you may catch more, you probably will catch more fish in the areas where you can actually control your boat, versus the areas where there's actually more fish. So just a few things to think about if you're going out in the wind. Yeah, we're gonna keep on fishing. There's a little pot of fish. Now we're in business here. There we go. Okay, this one's got a real good attitude. So I gotta give a shout out. Right now we're on Rainy Lake. My drag is not behaving well. We are on Rainy Lake, and I was talking to my buddy Donnie, and I gotta give him the shout out on this presentation. He had mentioned to me that the jig and paddle tail with the underspin was the dang ticket right now, and he is not lying. They are poking it, man. They're absolutely popping it. Oh. All right. Just another stinking gorgeous walleye. Just another paddle tail eater with the big underspin. Look at that stinking beautiful, beautiful bruiser of a walleye. And got a little blue tint to that tail. God, it's such a gorgeous fish. Amazing. All right, let's get it back. Shout out to Donnie for a little bit of a tip on the presentation. Solid fish and solid bite, and this is a really fun way to catch them. This is not a tactic and a strategy that's going to work everywhere. You know, your most highly pressured bodies of water, places where, you know, there's a reason why oftentimes I'm using live bait, I'm using finesse presentations, but in some situations you can get away with getting big and aggressive, and when you can, that is the absolute funnest way, funnest is the word, right? Funnest way to catch walleyes. So this has been an absolute blast, despite the fact that the weather's been a little rough. I've been kind of running around finding some water that's maybe a little bit less crazy. So anywho, we're gonna call it here. If you enjoyed this video, check out this video right here. That is drop shot fishing. Drop shot fishing is a tactic that's also very effective in windy conditions like this. It's a bait delivery system or a plastic delivery system that's really efficient and easy to cast and work in the wind. So check out that one. That's another tactic that you can pair with your swim baits in conditions like this.